Good morning, everybody. So there's a well-known quote. There were lots of quotes yesterday, so I thought I'd find another quote for you today. And it says, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. So the logic goes, if you can't measure something, you can't improve it. And we're all aware of the need to make progress on the SDGs. There are serious data gaps, but not only for the SDGs, also at national level. And this is what this discussion is about. It's about how do we build national capacity to meet their needs, their objectives, and how do we match the priorities of governments and donors with national needs? So a lot of questions, a little time. And we really want to hear from you in the audience. And of course, to our remote audience, please, you have a chat. So if in the chat you want to say where you're joining us from or the sector you belong to, that would be great. But also, please, our remote audience, who we want not to be too remote, we want to bring them in to the forum. Please also ask questions, because we will be taking questions. And of course, everybody tweet using hashtag UN Data Forum. And also there's the Twitter handle @Road2Burn. So that's 2 with a number, of course. Well, with statisticians, everything is with numbers. So who are these wonderful people with me? Bart Sohiel is the Director General, that's my Norwegian, by the way, of one of the world's largest international donors. I think we all like the Norwegians, you know. They give a lot of money, huh? And he's Director General of the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, so welcome. We've also got Njide Ndili, who's the Country Director for Farmer Access in Nigeria. And this is an international NGO that uses mobile technology and data to connect people in sub-Saharan Africa to better healthcare. And Charles Kimpolo is a member of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and Director of the Industry Initiative at the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, or Sciences. And they have a really good tag on their website, which is that the next Einstein is going to come from Africa. So that's obviously why Charles was invited, because you know that there's an Einstein-like motif going through this conference, I think, with the fact that Einstein lived in Bern, and it was here that he developed his most famous theory. But really importantly, we have somebody who is joining us very late. She's joining us 12 hours ahead. So that means that it's really bedtime in Samoa. So we've got the head of the Bureau of Statistics. I'm going to say her name once, Alimuma Malafono, but she's kindly let me call her Fono. So Fono, thank you so much. And I think we actually all want to be with you, because look at that backdrop. So thank you for joining us. And I'm going to begin with Fono, because I think it's really important to hear from the national statistics offices. So Fono, first question to you. Where are the gaps in building your national capacity?
Thank you for that. Let me say that I do acknowledge a lot of donor support to Samoa, especially when we conduct census and surveys and a lot of other statistical projects. But after many years of working at the statistics office, I noted that we still don't get the full package of actually having a full capacity built at the NSO level. For example, if I say the household income and expenditure survey, donors have been helping us with field work, helping us with collecting the money. But when it comes to actually analyzing the data, doing the tabulation and analyzing the data and actually writing a poverty report, we are left behind. It's the same when we conducted the DHS and the mix, it's the same. You know, we work together from the beginning and then right towards the end where we really want to see what is going on in the data. we are left behind because, you know, obviously we don't have the same capacity as the donors have. They have technical people who are the experts of this kind of complex analysis. That's how I see it. So what we really need to do is donors are really serious about building the capacity in the NSOs, not just for Samoa, but all the Pacific Islands. I think they need to do a lot of more investment in the long-term capacity building for the staff so that we are able to stand on our own 2 feet and be able to interpret our own data, be able to write about it, and be able to apply it in our own situation.
Fono, thank you. And if you would like to speak up, perhaps even nearer to the microphone, that would be great, because I can see that Bart is really listening to you there. And, you know, what we really get is what she's been saying, is they're not getting the full package, yeah? They're allowed to collect the data for the surveys, but they don't get to analyze it or write the reports, and they want to be able to do everything. And also, sometimes the local context is not taken into consideration. Fono, just tell me, what is the problem? Why are you not always able to put in specific questions which would help us understand the local context? What's the problem here?
Well, usually, you know, with all these generic questionnaire, for the purpose of comparable results with other countries. So we seem to adopt the standard questionnaire for all the countries. But we have our own questions that we really want to include in those questionnaires, like the household income and expenditure questionnaire, the DHS, the mix. They are all the same questions across many countries, but we have our own problems that we think that it should be included in those generic questionnaire, so that we are able to also not only getting the information for the global community, but also get some for our own, to our own advantage.
Yes, the problem of generic surveys, they're not specific enough to local needs, and as a result, they miss some quality data. But if you would just like to, I don't know whether you work in Samoa or not, but if you would like to respond to what Fono has said, first of all.
Yeah, sure. Would you first allow me just to say that it's fantastic to be here? I don't think I've seen so many people at once in 18 months. So, at least not of different nationalities. So, I mean, I feel a bit socially awkward still, but I'm practicing. Yes, it's recognizable, even though we don't work in Samoa. If I was just to pick up one issue, I mean, it's not a flaw, but one thing that I think should be at the core of doing things better. It's putting data and statistics at the heart of what we do, not in the periphery. And I think in global development, and we have a lot to do to get there. Because data, I mean, it's like the infrastructure of the 21st century, right? If you have good access to data, it informs policy, right? Your facts can inform policy. You can now learning outcomes and how many schools to build, and you can improve healthcare and I mean resource management and so on. The private sector needs data to invest well, all that, and putting it at the core of every development effort is, I think, key to do better, and that's also part of what we're hearing there. That at least when we try to work with partners in NORAD, from NORAD's side, it's also important that it's demand-driven. We can only assist, right? That's what development assistance is about. So we have to start by understanding what is the need of our partner, how are they thinking, and then we can assist. And I think that's also an example here, what we're hearing. We will try to adapt our partnership and our cooperation to what's the actual need in a partner country.
I mean, where does it come, just sort of picking up on this idea of general surveys, where's the balance? Because, you know, in life, unfortunately, often the people with the money, you know, win the argument. And you obviously sometimes need information for your needs, but, you know, Phono has her needs. So how do you get the balance right?
Well, I think, you know, global development and our development cooperation is not about putting our interests at the heart of what we do, but rather the opposite. It's about assisting making Samoa and other countries develop their country based on their interests. And of course, so from time to time we have discussions or could have differing opinions. But I think that approach is extremely important if you're going to build capacity well in a country. And I know of no development story of any country, even, I mean, you look at developed countries today, that hasn't had good data and actually building capacity to use them as an important part of it. If I may add just one point also, it is that I think using open source data and building capacities globally to use that is really important. Norway is co-secretariat of the Digital Public Goods Alliance globally alongside UNICEF. And we are working with different kinds of partners with that. There we are investing in open source digital public goods. And the fantastic thing about them is of course that they can be shared, scaled widely, so much more easily and efficiently than other investments. And that, I think, is also a really important part of the future when it comes to international development on data and statistics.
I mean, it seems also that there's, and it was mentioned yesterday by a number of our speakers, in fact, I think it was mentioned by Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, about the need to build trust. And it just seems, I don't know what the other speakers think, but listening to Phono's story there, whoever her international donors are, there's a lack of trust because they're only allowing her to collect the data. They're not allowing her team to analyze it or report on it. So, yeah, how do we build trust between, you know, the donors and the national societies? I mean, perhaps I could bring in everybody and on this one.
Yeah, so it's interesting to listen to her. I think the litmus test is when the international donors leave, do the systems and projects remain or do they collapse? I'm funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands to build the capacity of local actors to build a healthcare system. The foundation is called Farm Access Foundation. And really, this is in line with the trade and aid policy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. So basically what we do is that first of all, we start with understanding deeply what the issues are within the local context, because no one size fits all. Then after that, we co-create with the local partners so that they have ownership. In fact, as we go in, our premise is we need to exit at some point. So how do we build structures, build capacity so that the ownership lies with the local entities? So in some instances, I actually embed staff within the ministries. So, you know, we are building capacity not just at the local, regional level, but also at the national level, building systems that are sustainable but co-created. In fact, now we stand at the back and we direct and push so that they can take up the systems after we leave. But what is fundamental to our innovations in Nigeria, as well as we're in 3 other African countries, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, is that data is really, in healthcare, is the pillar around which the health system is built. Without that data, we cannot really make policies, build a healthcare system. And you know, we talk so much about data, digital transformation, digitalization, but I think there's also, for the international community, a need to step back and look at what I would call the Maslow's theory of data. Is the infrastructure there? Is the connectivity there? Are we able in Africa to leapfrog? Because we talk about artificial intelligence, big data, but I can tell you that more than half of the population in Africa is not connected via the internet, but they have these mobile phones. Africa has one of the fastest growing and adoption of mobile technology in the world today, with over 400 million unique subscribers in sub-Saharan Africa. So, can we use that to leapfrog, like what is happening in Kenya with Antiva? So these are some of the things that we try to do to use existing, not really complicated structures, but simple structures that are easy to adopt, and then use that to scale with local partners. But subsequently, I'll talk about the work we're doing with the Financial Times and Lancet Commission, which is really focused on how we can use artificial intelligence and digital health to achieve SDG 3. Also considering that a lot of Africans are under the age of 35. And listening to the youth leader yesterday, he talked about trust, but two words I also like to introduce is endurance and flexibility, taking into account the local context. So I'll stop at that, but
absolutely, yeah. And I think, we can talk about communicating the data in a moment. I just also wanted to come back to, I thought it was really interesting that, of course, Farm Access is funded by the Dutch Foreign Ministry, and I wanted to ask about that relationship, because, of course, they're building your capacity. Do you get what you need from them?
Definitely. So what... everybody knows the Dutch healthcare system is one of the best in the world. With almost everybody covered. So what tends to happen is that we have a head office in Amsterdam, and we also take lessons learned from the other African countries and then aggregate them and then begin to experiment, innovate within our local context. So there's a lot of capacity development going on. I myself, I've learned so much in the 6 years I've been there, and this is transferred on to the local stakeholders. Also, partly what we have done is establish a healthcare management program for leadership, because oftentimes you find that the leaders are often behind, are not keeping to pace with the innovation. So you find private sector and the innovators who are outside government, outside the regulators, are actually far ahead of innovation. They are the ones capturing the data and not sharing the data. The developmental partners are, putting money and they're owning the data. So how do we make sure that, we're building capacity of government so that they are keeping pace with innovation? They're finding a way to be the aggregator, because when you talk about data, really, it should be a government function to bring together or pull together all the data, to make sense of it, to analyze it, but we're finding that that capacity doesn't exist. So private sector is often a tangent, analyzing and, making money as well of that data.
So Fono, I'll come back to you in a moment, but I just want Charles to put on his academic hat. And first of all, just to reflect on what you've heard about best practice, and also how you apply that at your institute. And then we'll come back to Fono to reflect on what she's heard.
Thank you very much. I want to just echo what the previous speaker said in terms of being happy to make it here and be part of this conversation. So yes, I think trust is a big word in partnership, and it takes time to build trust. What we have seen is that there are long-term relationships that doesn't result to trust, and the question is why. So yes, in terms of best practices, I think it should be universal. My own experience is that there's quite the way people have seen. I think the previous session was talking about global south versus global north. I don't want to go to that discussion, but I just want to realize that specific regions have specific context. So even when you actually have a great need assessment, that this is what you want to do it for these countries, countries have priority at that time that you're doing that need assessment. I think it's important to have a table where there's a balance. I don't want to talk about the power. Power means that, oh, you give me money, that you have a say. But it's actually how to build trust where you listen to people, because they are doing things in a very specific context that you might not know. And at that time, what you believe is a priority might not be. It might be priority number 2, but not number 1.
Do you think, though, that sometimes the Western donors think that they've got the right model and they know it, and that best practices are Western practices?
Yes, I've seen that. I think in this room you will see that when people say best practices, it means what is happening in Chicago, how would you apply it in Nigeria? It's not the other way around. Well, we know that there's a lot of things in Nigeria that people in Washington can learn from. So I want to change that. And I wanted a change of mindset in a way that we need to adjust to change. Right? We're having this meeting in the blended model because of COVID-19. No one has a clue when we met in Dubai that we're not going to have one together. So I think, yes, let's shift it, because best practices are good practices that you have seen in different contexts that we should learn from each other.
Can I just ask you for a specific? Because, as you say, it does tend to be, I don't know whether it's top-down or Western-down or whatever, but can you give us a few good practices? Because you've been doing partnerships with industry, you're training the future data scientists. What are the good practices that, some of the people who come from Western Europe, America, the international donors should follow?
I think the first one is actually what you made to say, coming from the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences and believing that the next Einstein is going to be an African should be good practice, right? What we do at EMS is 3 things. We are building the university of the 21st century. We're not educating and training graduates that are going to be unemployed, because the employment rate in Africa is continuing to increase. For the youth, is worse. When you actually zoom in, women is even getting worse and worse. So at EMS, we do 3 things. We're putting the youth at the center of the social and economic development of Africa. How do we do that? Do that through postgraduate training in mathematical sciences. When people hear math, they say X and Y. It's actually the application of mathematics in trying to understand COVID-19, vaccination, all of that. So yes, we do that. We are attracting the best students in Africa to come to our network of Center of Excellence to train them in specific skills that they need to tackle challenges in Africa. So I've been doing this since 2003. We have 5 centers of excellence in Africa, in South Africa, Senegal, Cameroon, Ghana, and Rwanda. The second thing that we do is research and innovation. We are attracting the African diaspora. These are the experts that have proven themselves in global institutions that are coming back to use the expertise and actually drive and build capacity in terms of research. The third one that we do is public engagement, trying to ensure that cross-cutting gender and environment are taken care of. I want to give you a simple example of what we're doing, which I believe is best practice. And this is not me as a person. I think I'm just a voice of a team. I think I saw my colleague from Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. When COVID came and took us by surprise, what did we notice? That we need to move online, because we couldn't have in-person interaction. But in Africa now, people realize, you mentioned it, that moving online is not just a click of your finger, right? You need to do an assessment to say, do you have the skills? I think the president of Microsoft talked about the third component, which was the people, the skills. We have statisticians. We have National Office of Statistics. But when you're talking about COVID-19 and data that's kind of big data, it's not statistics, right? Do you have the skills? Do you believe that statisticians can produce the level of sophistication in terms of data analysis? I think Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Goal is the model, to my belief, because they came to assess the situation with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa to just say, what are the needs? And how do we go about building this capacity? Turning a statistician to a data scientist is not a month job. That's a fact. Because many statisticians will say, I think one of the speakers said that, I'm good in stat, but I don't know how to do the narrative and a lot of things. Data science is not stat. Data science includes statistics. At EMS, because the way we actually frame and develop training is really to understand what is this content that we need to put in place. So in partnership with Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, we put together an introductory data science course for a month done online, where we're able to train 80 government officials from 15 countries in Africa. 21% of them were women. We knew at EMS that training them was giving them some skills, technical skill, very theoretical skill about machine learning, artificial intelligence. Maybe they're going to be smiling about this buzzword. Now they know the knowledge. At EMS, we knew that it was important for them to go to the ground where they were working, develop what I call work-integrated learning program, where we paired them, the statistician being exposed to data science, very new. They're not going to have expertise to drive data science project. We paired them with EMS alumni, the next extension, which we are training. There are 2,500 across Africa from 44 African countries. 32% of them are women. We knew that it was important as a model to take the EMS alumni who were doing the Python and other machine learning, pair them together to develop priority-defined projects. And I have a list of them. I think I saw Oliver in this room.
Don't give us the list,
it's just one
but
example.
tell them where they can find it,
Yes.
and then I want to bring Phono in.
I think I'm very proud of the project that we did with the Economic Commission of Africa.
Okay.
So a EMS alumni went in there. It did an automatic economic data collection for African countries using web scraping for ECA, Price Watch Center for Africa. I think Oliver made a comment to say that's the model. There are 5 years I cannot actually give you. How did we do that? If we just went our way to say, do it online, bring an expert, do the training, it wouldn't work. Because this statistician wouldn't feel empowered enough to actually drive data science. Pairing them, which is the model I wanted to suggest, is work-integrated learning. Pair the training to hands-on experience on project data priority, data defined with a local context. I think that is what I will believe if people did not know this before, but I think it's best practice to my definition.
Okay, absolutely. Let's ask Phono then, because she's told us about the gaps, and you've heard about, of course, it has to be matched to your needs. You've got Charles' best practice. You've heard from Injede, who you actually embed people with organizations. So tell us, what do you need as well? Is it these sort of best practices? And if you would like to reflect on anything else you've heard, the floor is now yours.
Let me thank both presenters and all three of you for actually sharing your experience and from what you know. I think you mentioned lack of demand as one of the hurdles for us using statistics in policy making. And as I mentioned, because we are left behind from actually getting involved in analyzing our own data, then we are not able to create that demand for data, because we are not involved in the analysis and knowing our own data. And also there's a lot of other groups that are left behind, which we should have brought in as part of the whole analysis team, like people from the academia, people from the media, all the stakeholders and policy makers. All those people should have been in one room looking into that data and making analysis and making narrative or whatever. They can make stories out of the data. So I think when there's more investment in coordination and collaboration with all people who will be using the data, then we will be able to create more demand for data. And I like the idea of actually, I think I thank you for actually supporting the transferring of knowledge actually by doing, like what he mentioned, just what he spoke about having I really appreciate having that training sector for the Africans and having encouraging hands-on work. I think that's the type of training that we really want to be done when donors come in, to give us that opportunity to hands-on work, so that when they leave, and we are able to continue and sustain the capacity building and also building more younger people to be involved in statistics. So, and I think those are some key things that I think it should help minimize the gap that we have in trying to connect what we do with what we actually give out to the people. Also, one of the problems is, I think, with our donors, we really want them to invest more in actually communicating the data. Like when the reports are written, and when we are asked to interpret those reports, you know, there's a big disadvantage of not being part of the analysis, and then you are asked to interpret. I mean, how can you interpret when you were not there? So those are the risks of actually not getting everyone involved in the analysis.
That's a really good point, I think. If you're only part of the process doing the collecting, but suddenly you've got to communicate it to government ministries and you've got to sell it, but you haven't been part of the process, then you're going to be less convincing. And I think what also Njide was saying, this importance of not only building capacity for the national statistics offices, but across government departments as well. But I don't know whether that's something that you do.
Yeah, and I think this is really, really important. And maybe to answer the question, well, let me just a few words about how we work. I mean, we are a donor, right? So we fund the projects, but we totally rely on others to actually do the work. And we can't do anything without partners. So for data work, we typically rely on Statistics Norway, but also on other institutions. But we do work to build capacity specifically in statistics, but we also include it when we do other kinds of work. And we are organized, we call it the knowledge bank in NORAD. It's not like a regular bank, but maybe a human resources bank, you can say. And we also use data and data analysis a lot and build capacity when we work with partners on natural resource management or energy resource management or tax systems or other things. So we always try to have data and the use of data and the capacity to build it as part of it. And here comes the answer to this, because it's very important to us not only to build the technical capacity, right? We have to build the whole ecosystems of resources around. So the human resources to understand the capacity to use data to inform policy and so on, the codes of statistical use and the whole infrastructure around. And it's also important, I mean, we probably can do better, but we try to first do a thorough work ahead of partnerships, and we also try to be an enduring partner over time. Okay, could I also just briefly pick up on the best practices issue, because I think it's interesting, at least the way we think of it ourselves. We're not trying to tell Nigeria to do it the Norwegian way. We are trying to be a partner to find the Nigerian way, but based on some competence that we can share, right? And a best practice is not only about how do you do it in Norway and in Nigeria. I mean, in Norway we have different agencies. Some turn out to be better than others, right? And then they can learn from each other. Or in Scandinavia, Norway does some things better than Sweden. A lot of things, I'm joking. but I mean, even Sweden does some things better. And maybe Ghana does some things better than Nigeria, right? So learning from best practice is more of a method, a way of thinking. And well, in some aspects, of course, we have some competencies and capacities that we can share, but you have to build your own best practice in every partner country.
All right, that's well said. And what I wanted to add is just how to validate best practices. And who validate best practices. In the research community, we know that you publish because peer review. But looking at where the knowledge is coming or being generated as like you don't trust, that's why I'm saying that we need to shift that mindset, because it might come from there, but it's going to be good practice. So who validates best practice? I think our colleague was talking about co-creation. I like the way of doing together. Let's co-create. so that even if you want ownership, we're going to discuss it, but let's do it together. It's more sustainable than just looking at it like up and down.
Yeah. Inge, this is interesting, this validation of best practice. Is this something that you grapple with? Or?
So that's where the Financial Times and Lancet Commission comes in, governing health futures. This is the first time the Financial Times and the UN are coming together, and the Lancet coming together to set up a commission. There are 18 commissioners from different aspects focused on healthcare, but really we're in the world where healthcare finally is adopting digital. So, but the flow of data is so fluid, and we're concerned about the governance of it, the ownership of it, human rights, because really who owns the data, but how can we also harness it for public good? So we have been working over the past 2 years to put together this report, which will be launched this month in Berlin during the World Health Summit. But it really articulates the pillars around which you can have good governance around data and the use of data for public good. So depending on where countries are, because as we hear, so many countries are at different stages of digital adoption. There are those at the bottom, quite a number, not just in Africa, other lower middle income countries, and there are high adopters, those that are wanting to opt out, young people wanting to opt out from being digitally documented. So there are a lot of variations going on. So how can we use a set of guidelines and principles that have been validated by WHO and the UN to guide good data governance and to use that to progress? So again, this, the reason why the commissioners were selected from different parts of academia and experiences is to bring together all the vast experience we've developed, not just in private sector, but also in government, to be able to define the structures so that regardless of where countries are in terms of digital adoption, they can plug in somewhere or at least have a guideline. So we're hoping, really anticipating that the report will be very useful.
And when does it come out? You can do a bit of a plug.
Yeah,
it's not the BBC. You can plug it.
Well, it has to go through so many reviews from the Lancet, but it is going to be launched officially October 25th in Berlin. Then it will be available. Then we're going to take it on the road. But really, it's now for the governments to look at this and look for what is relevant within their own local context and pick it up. But it's really to ensure that data is protected. Data can be seen as human rights. It ensures equity. We talk about leave no one behind. I can tell you that in Africa or even in Nigeria, I'm not sure that we actually know our population. There was a census, but I was never counted. I have 4 children who are not counted. So all of a sudden, you are trying to provide services and collect data, and you don't even know the people within your territory. So these are some of the issues that it throws up. How do we begin to look at digital literacy? How do we empower the regulators to backward integrate into developing the structures, the infrastructure, the electricity? There's so many different pillars that need to be in place for us to actually harness good data, which I heard.
And good practices.
And good practices. So there are so many building blocks, and different countries are at different levels. But it's really to highlight what you need to keep in focus, to make sure that, the aim is really SDG 3 by 2030, and we're just 9 years away. So it's a tall order, but we cannot achieve objective without data.
And I'm going to take some audience questions in a moment, but I just want to throw it open a little bit more to whose capacity are we building? And of course, we've mentioned young people, we've mentioned data literacy. This was a key thing that I think Nicolas Courac was really plugging yesterday during the opening ceremony. Is this something that's on your agenda, building data literacy? So it's not just the national statistics offices, it's not just the government ministries, but it's also the citizens.
Yes, it is, but typically from the knowledge bank and the work we do on capacity building, it's typically a government institution or several institutions that are our partner, and that building that capacity is the focus. But we fund lots of work, for instance, in the education field or on healthcare, that has more attention on building, for instance, data literacy. In education, we've been part of now funding the global digital public library. We've translated learning materials to, I think it's 240 languages or something like that, just during COVID-19, to be able to reach out to, I mean, before COVID-19, 9 out of 10 kids were in school. Then, just in a week or two, 9 out of 10 kids were out of school, right? And everyone doesn't have that access, but quite a few does. And also through the Digital Public Goods Alliance that I mentioned, we are funding projects to see whether digital means like smartphones and so on can actually build learning abilities and data literacy. So yes, but typically it's a bit of a different work than the capacity building on the government side.
And of course, you're building the capacity of the young people at your institute. Do you go broader? Because of course they've got a natural talent for numbers, whereas lots of us, including myself, have no talent.
Exactly. Just to give a little bit of perspective, so in Africa, every year we have 10 to 12 million people who enter the workforce. On the other side, you have 1 to 3 million formal jobs that are created. So you have a deficit of jobs, and that is not a good thing for the continent. Why, even for the 3 formal million jobs that you have a skill mismatch. So you have a lot of graduates that have the bachelor degree that cannot be employed. And so at EMS, what we do, so my department, the EMS Industry Initiative, is just to connect learning institution or research institution with the outside world, which is any private, public sector, or NGOs, to understand what the demand is. So everyone is talking about data science. The private sector is even moving ahead, right? Data science started before COVID. Private sector was pushing. So at EMS, we actually understand the demand, and we build our training to adjust to the demand. Why? Because we really wanted to ensure that all the graduates that are coming from our institution get jobs. But we also wanted to anticipate, because in Africa, we have been playing catch-up. The population of Africa is going to double in maybe 30 years from now. What kind of system and structure of the population are we going to have? Are you going to have 60% of those young people unemployed? What kind of society are you preparing? COVID-19 is just teaching us that when something happens, you need to adjust. So at EMS, we're taking capacity building, not only we help government, we help the private sector, but we put the youth at the center of that, because they're the one that in 9 years, as you were saying, they want to ask the question, what did you do with SDG? Because we want to train them to get employed. But we also wanted to use this relationship to really know what the demand is not static, it's dynamic. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence. In 10 years, we're going to talk about something that we don't have a keyword today. So at EMS, we anticipate to say that training should be adjusted. We have this agile mindset. We adjust to change. We don't follow like a road. Yes. Capacity development for us is across the board. And I like the fact of you're talking about the ecosystem. So I'm coming from Rwanda. I'm very proud of that country. They have a data science campus. Very good building. I think even in Unica also they're building a data science campus. So having infrastructure is good. But the president of Microsoft talked about the third pillar, which is people and skills. We need to take the skill development very, very seriously. A last point I wanted to make is the statistics about the mobile penetration in Africa. I think we need also to shift our mind to not continue being consumers, but producers of technology. I don't think that we're going to develop technology on mobile phones in Africa. I'm not very sure about that. Even when you unpack that statistics, the difference between mobile penetration for feature phone and smartphone is not the same. Yes. I believe we need to be bold enough, if we really want disruptive change, to take a step back to say, if the population of Africa is going to double in 30 years from now, how many data scientists will we need? Because the world is going to be connected. And you start building it very seriously, because that's what we're doing at EMS, but at very low scale. So I commend the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development data, because they have now 100 partners across the world. That's huge knowledge. That's that's a resource that we can actually tap into to really scale up, because we don't have time.
Fono, just going back to you about this capacity building, you need it in the National Statistics Office. You've explained, I think, also the government ministries need it. But what is the status of capacity building, data literacy, perhaps, amongst the general population in Samoa? Is this something that you need donor support with, government support?
Yes, very much. As I mentioned, I think what is important for us, if we are to create demand for data, I still believe that we need to bring all these people who are using data and who will be the ones communicating data to be part of the full team. You know, it's not just us producing data. We need to bring people who will be using the data and communicating data to be part of the whole package. Because if they appreciate the data by being involved in analyzing and putting together all these reports, then they will be the one who will advocate for the use of data for evidence policy making. I think I really believe that we have. You were asking about good practice, example of a good practice. We have a current project in analyzing the inequality assessments for civil registration. It's a new one. We are doing it with the assistance of SCAP. And this is one of the best practices that I think really works for us, because we hired a local consultant who actually knows about our own way of going about registration of births, deaths, and marriages. Then we bring in a group of the key users of this data from the Ministry of Health, from the courts, from the police, and from the community. And we are now all working together to find out where the gaps are. Why are we having low registration of deaths, births, and marriages? And because they all contribute in one way or another in the registration, the whole process. We are now working together as a group to find out our own where the system is weak, not from our own side, but also from the Ministry of Health. Where have they gone wrong in actually registration of new births? Because we are not able to register a birth without the original registration from the Ministry of Health. So that's the kind of effort that's a good practice to me in terms of civil registration.
Thank you, Fono, for sharing that best practice there, and again about collaboration. I'd like to ask now people in the audience. The focus was, are we doing capacity building in the right way? Whether that is national statistics offices, government ministries, citizens. You've heard some things that need improvement on. You've heard some best practices. You've heard some thoughts from our esteemed panelists. Please, if you have any questions, now is the moment. As a former journalist, I always like to think there's no such thing as a stupid question. Otherwise, I couldn't do what I'm doing now. So if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, and somebody will come around with a microphone. I would also like to say we've got a few questions coming in remotely. And I can see that there is, I think, a gentleman at the back. Perhaps, yes, if you'd like to stand up, if you'd like to say who you are and where you're from, even better, and who the question is for.
Hello, my name is Shyam Upadhyay. I'm independent practitioner. I think my question is any of the panelists. In international development program, we often use the terminology supply-driven or demand-driven program. Now, we are talking about the global partnership, which will include international financial institutions, private companies, technological giants like Microsoft, Google. Are the members of the panel concerned that inclusion of such agencies would actually serve the interest of supply-driven programs, of the company's interest, financial institutions' interest, and undermine the local demand of the capacity development? So any of you can, if you could answer, I would be very pleased. Thank you.
I can see a natural fit, perhaps, for NJD. I don't know whether Charles, please.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
So, as I understand, the question is about these international financing organizations, yeah? And how do we make sure that there is supply and demand that fits for national levels? That's what I understood by the question. But if I've got it wrong, tell us, because we can only answer the question if we understand it.
Yeah. Oh.
Microphone.
Make it as simple as possible, please. Sorry for that. Yeah,
okay, once again, there is a supply-driven development program and demand-driven development program in international assistance. Now we are talking about including financial and private institutions, private companies, including technological giants like Google and Microsoft. If we bring such companies with the strong business interest, will development assistance go on the wrong direction, promoting more supply-driven program rather than local demand-driven? Or I'm afraid, or are you concerned that it will undermine the local demands?
Okay,
Thank you.
understood. We've
Now
got
it
it.
is
Too much
understood?
power from the private sector. They're driving the demand in my very simplistic terms.
Exactly, and you're spot on, because that is the tendency. That is what typically happens. So, and that's why our focus is to try to build the capacity of the regulators so that they are able to understand and better regulate these companies as they come in. Unfortunately, in the example of Nigeria, if you look at fundraising and fintech, Nigeria is high up there now because there's so many innovations that are coming out of Nigeria. And because the regulation right now is not strong enough, there's a lot of money to be made, especially in fintech. So really it is, how do we make sure that those who are making the regulations are regulating in the best interest of the local context, and they are synergizing and making sure that the solutions that are being brought in fits the local context and solving the local needs. Unfortunately, private sector, right now, we have to strike a balance between stifling innovation and encouraging innovation. So that is the delicate balance that the regulators are trying to find. And we, as an NGO and a foreign NGO, we can only advise, especially in healthcare, but we cannot really, predict or, mandate how they go about it, but really to educate them, build the capacity so they're better able to make an informed decision about how to manage these tech companies. But
yeah, it's the regulators.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to have a go at this question now because it's a very good question now we've understood it. But
no, I mean, I share the concerns. And for instance, you can see, of course, the tech companies want to invest in everything from internet coverage to software and so on to create the demand. But there's another side of it too, and that is that official development assistance alone can't finance the sustainability development goals, or not even close to it, right? We absolutely need the private sector in OECD countries and in developing countries to step up and invest a lot more than it's happening today. In NORAD, we did a report this winter looking at Nordic foreign direct investment to developing countries. And of course, there's a lot of the FDI from the Nordic countries, and from Norway specifically. But if you looked at an FDI from Norway to the least developed countries, it was 0.23% of all Norwegian FDI. 0.23. And even lower middle-income countries, that's countries like Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, the Philippines, so on, only 2 to 3%. So we absolutely have to do things to get private companies to invest a lot more. So I think the solution then is more to, like you're saying, to make sure that there's capacity in countries to regulate and that there's competence to work with that. That's what at the heart of what we are working with in the Knowledge Bank. We are working with countries in energy, for instance, in fisheries management, making sure that they can actually regulate, have the judicial know-how, the competence to keep income in their country and to regulate well. And we have to make sure, from the donor's perspective, that we are also in the driver's seat, that the public sector is in the driver's seat also from the donor side. A bit at length, but a really important question.
Very important question. Here's my answer. We must create a critical mass to have a supply-demand solid, and then the demand will actually sort out. And when you talk about the private sector, I think we need to remember global private sector versus local private sector. I haven't seen a country, that's what I was talking about. Development should be a common purpose. It shouldn't be like, because I'm private sector, I'm against development. Development should be. So, but the solution for me is to balance it out. Because if the private sector are absorbing some graduate to get them job, that's development. Are we not going to take some employment? Disrupting local demand or supply is a separate conversation. I think the regulator will do that. But the question I ask, who regulates? Who writes policy? Who is the expert that's going to write this policy that makes sense? Right? So for me, in Africa, I would say, is that my priority number one? Because I see the conversation about Google, Facebook, Apple. Even in Europe, it's not even sorted out yet. I wouldn't put it in my list of my priority in Africa. They're there, they're creating jobs. I will open my eye to say, let's create enough capacity. Let's do it aggressively so that we do not have this problem, because I want my young people to get jobs. I want them to contribute to the economy. That's priority number one for me. But I also wanted to be very careful, because these people are collecting enough data. Is it a threat to our security and things like that? I am careful, but I'm not going to make that like a fight, right? I really want to say, let's do business, and development should be a common priority.
And I think in another panel discussion, I mean, this is the hot issue, isn't it, about the private sector. We need them, but, you know, can we regulate them? And as you say, in Europe, they're struggling with Google and Apple, and that will be addressed in another session. I will come to the audience in a moment, but I think, Fono, we've got a question here which has come in from our remote audience, which I think is really interesting. It says, should national statistics offices revisit or rethink their approach towards capacity development? So that's you as building the capacity development. As you have a role as data stewards of the data ecosystem, do you need to map the needs of other institutions? Should the national statistics offices be doing this actively to build the capacity of the other institutions, is what I've understood from that question. What do you think, Fono?
Yes, I think at this stage, I think we really need to go back and see our priorities, where we really need the capacity in the office, and actually rethink the areas where we are lacking, and then from there on, we can rebuild from where we are now. In terms of the second question, in terms of actually...
Yes, it's whether, you know, you have a role to build capacity, and should you be mapping the needs of other institutions for capacity?
Yes, yes. As I mentioned, that is why it's important to have this collaboration with your users. Because if you know, if you have a close relationship with your users, you will also know their capacity, whether they really need that data literacy we're also talking about, and then if there is a need, then there is more demand for us working together in partnership. So we need more collaboration. Not that we will learn also from them. They learn from us and we learn from them. It's a give and take kind of process.
Yeah, capacity building is never ending, is it? We're all having our capacity built the whole time, and where our responsibilities to build the capacity of others. In the room, are there some questions, Charles? Yes, lady, it's very good when you wear red, because with my poor eyes, I can see them. I can see you. So please, the microphone come to you and say who you are and your question, and if there's a specific person that you would like to answer.
Should I go?
Yeah, I think you do, most probably, because this is a big room.
Thank you. My name is Frida Giduku. I'm from GROOTS, Kenya. So I come from Kenya, and GROOTS is a network of grassroots organizations in the gender equality and women empowerment space. We are very much invested in gender data. Mine is a comment and not a question. A lot of social development priorities and social justice issues can be effectively measured using qualitative data. But if you look at the national statistical offices, I'm talking about the one that I know at home, a lot of statisticians, and I'm sure even the ones present here, are more passionate, more skilled, and more interested in quantitative data. And perhaps, and I say this because I know this has undermined the manner in which qualitative data is analyzed, processed, and used, including to measure some of the indicators in the SDGs at the local and country level. And perhaps that is an urgent area of capacity development.
So we need to build capacity for qualitative data rather than quantitative?
I would even say build capacity for non-tech people. So at EMS we have executive education, where capacity is not only getting in a room, in a lab and coding, but also raising awareness. Trying to ask journalists, how do you present this kind of data? You might have experience in presenting statistics. Now it's big data. It's coming from social media. How do you package it? So I think capacity, that is one level of capacity that I believe we shouldn't ignore.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Other people in the room? Yes, there's a lady in a cream jacket, and then the lady in green, and then we'll go to the lady potentially in pink. Sorry, I've got gender bias here. We're going to the women.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm from Ethiopia. I'm Abarash Tariku from Ethiopia. So my questions, first of all, I just want to recognize and acknowledge the support we are getting from Statistics Norway and NORAD, and also from UNSD on different areas of capacity. Coming to the questions, the capacity need which I expect and which we need is first of all, conducting comprehensive training need assessment for all national statistical system, for all NSS members. That is one area which we need.
Better needs assessment.
Training need assessment.
Training needs assessment.
Capacity need assessment, I mean, yeah. And the second one is on new methodologies, capacity on new methodologies, and also on research, different research areas, and also how to use the new data sources, like in addition to what we have been using, there are new data sources, but we don't have capacity on those areas.
So this is a list of demands that you want for more capacity development.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give this to Bart. I'm looking at time, and I want to take more questions.
Just one more on disaggregated data. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll mostly take this as, pieces of advice, basically, to how to develop our work. And there are also people from Statistics Norway in the room, actually. So we are always happy to understand better how we can assist and which parts of our work we need to develop. So take it as an input.
Okay, thank you. Please, the lady in green.
Oh, green.
Sorry, I was thinking the lady in green, the lady in pink. Yeah.
So tomorrow there'll be a lot
So
of colored
complicated,
suits
this
in the
role.
room, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please, gentlemen, you have to wear something really bright. That's the only way you're going to get my attention.
Leaving no one behind. Thank you. I just wanted to draw the attention of everybody actually in the room to another component of capacity building, which is sustainability of the capacity we are building. And I think it's very important in that context to consider national government's contribution to capacity building and to the commitment of high quality and good data produced by national statistical offices, but also produced, of course, by other agents who are doing whatever data production they are doing, which is useful for policy making. So I think the government commitment, national government commitment, is at least as important, maybe not financially as big, but at least as important as the national donors.
Thank you.
As the international donors.
Thank you. Yes, and please, if you've got a comment, make it clear that it's a comment. Let's go to the lady in pink, then the lady with the gold scarf. And then I might go to a gentleman, perhaps. There's one over there.
Hi, my name's Teresa. I'm from National Statistics Office from Angola. Someone mentioned about the status of data literacy amongst the general population. My question is, how would you go about capacity building for the general population? Naturally, I would think marketing campaigns, but if so, how would you measure the success of such an approach? And would there be an alternative approach? Thank you.
Great question.
Well, I can talk about that from my own experience or from our own suggestion, which is that it needs to be embedded in the curriculum of the schools. Oftentimes, you have to start at a really young age, especially since users of technology are now skewed more towards the young people, to embed it within the curriculum so that at the time of, leaving the college or secondary school, whatever you call it in the different countries, at least they know the basics. What is data? What data are you giving? How is that data going to be used? Because ultimately, I think for capacity development, it's important that all the stakeholders see the big picture. Who is producing the data? How is that data going to be used? Of what benefit is that data going to be used towards your own progress? So it's important that it's embedded within the curriculum, especially at a very young age. I think that's the best way to go about it. So institutionalizing data literacy.
We've got so many questions. I'm just going to direct them always to one person now. But the lady with the gold scarf.
Thank you very much. My name is Nenna Wakama. I'm the Chief Web Advocate at the World Wide Web Foundation. And I wanted to draw attention to the use of everyday media in communicating data, because this session is, are we building capacity? Right. I think we are, but maybe not enough. So my point is the communication part of data. We don't have enough time. I wanted to share a study by Yale about the data on which individuals make up their mind for or against vaccination, and is linked to their values. So my point is, when are we going to start building communication capacities linked to individual values, Njile was saying, so that I will look at your statistics not as numbers, but as values to me that will solve my problems, like football fans.
Yes, I think we have to wait till October the 25th for the launch of that report.
Exactly.
Huh? Okay. I'm going to move on to the gentleman over there. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Misha Belkindas. I am the president of the International Association of Official Statistics. My comment and maybe a question is, we are talking about building capacity of national statistical systems. And the best way to do it is probably to have consortia of private companies and national statistical institutes. And you call it the institutes from north and south and east and west. Only then you can give the best knowledge and the best advice to the institutions which need the advice. Many donors do not allow it because they want their national statistical institution to do it, but maybe their institution is not the best to deliver it. So maybe that would be a question to NORAD. Thank you.
Well, I do think Statistics Norway is quite good, but I don't know if they're the best in the world. I mean, maybe you could, if I were to answer it, I would say that some of our partnerships are bilateral, typically. Norway is working with the country. Then we will typically use the competence in the Norwegian agencies, not only statistics, but others. But then in other fields, we also support different kinds of multilateral funds and multilateral approaches. That's typically where we partner with other countries and where we use all kinds of providers from different countries. That's totally different. So in some models, yes, we do use the Norwegian capacities, definitely. Not because others couldn't do it well, but because we have the capacity and want to share it. But in other instances, it's different. I think it's just different models are working.
So I'm going to take one more question from this gentleman in front of me. It also helps to be in the front row, as well as bright colors. Thank you, please. I'm going to take one more question, and then, because we do need to close on time, I'm going to take a last question virtually, please.
Thank you. My name is Anir Chaudhary. I'm from Bangladesh. I lead a pan-government digital transformation program called Aspire to Innovate, A2I. I have two parts to the question. When we launched the Digital Bangladesh program in 2009, we looked at the digital literacy of our civil servants. So there was the target 2021 this year, 50th anniversary of our country's birth, to become a digital nation, digital-enabled nation. Now we're looking at 20 years down, 2041, and we have another civil service 2041 program where data and artificial intelligence are becoming very central pieces. But what COVID has taught us is that it's not just the civil service capacity. We need to make distinction between statistics and data, because data is being generated by everybody. Statistics perhaps is from the NSO. So when we develop capacity, it's actually across the board within government, private sector, and media as well, because media produced so much data during COVID, misinformation included, that it actually helped and confused us at the same time. So I think when we talk about the private sector, it's really capacity of understanding data for policymakers, because we used a lot of private sector data for COVID analysis, for generating dashboards and information for policymakers. Capacity of the civil servants to understand data science better and apply it in their work, and media to communicate, as my colleague over there talked about it. So I think it's comprehensive.
And your question is?
The question is, we cannot really look at it through the statistics angle. So if you look at it from a data angle, what is the capacity development program that we need to put in place going across NSO, the entire civil service, private sector, and media? I think it's a comprehensive look that we need to have. So your perspectives on that.
I think most probably people would agree, but they might not be able to indeed, as you work for the FT and Lancet Commission, you have a broad reach.
Yeah, so you know, our recommendation, which you will get details of that, really is that this role should be domiciled with the regional government or the government, and then cascaded down. So there has to be some oversight. Of course, there's a lot of capacity development happening in silos, funded by donors, funded by private sector. There's a lot that is going on. So how do you make sure that is aggregated? There's a way to scale it, So it's important that there is some kind of oversight And then I always step back to regulation and governance. You know, what structures do we need to put in place, especially around data? And that's where, you know, this report comes in handy because it focuses on data governance, right? And when you look at data governance, what are the different pillars around which you ensure that there's appropriate governance? And then from there, capacity building. So it's very broad. And, you know, it has to be tackled first of all, in silos, then aggregated up. That's the opinion that we have, because there's so many different stakeholders and so many different interested parties. And when you talk about private sector, they have their own interests. Donors, they have their own interests and their own you know, indicators that they want to monitor and so on. So they build capacity to achieve their own objectives. So how do we ensure that that is in line with the country's objectives? So again, it has to be country-led. There has to be some governance structure in place.
And that leads me very nicely, because it is midday, it is lunchtime. I don't want to keep you from your lunch. It's very late in Samoa. So this is a 30-second answer from everybody. Let's start. We don't have anybody from government on this panel, but the governments are asking, as donor governments, how can we best come together to unify progress? Nice end question. 30 seconds, Charles. What do you want from the governments?
Do better coordinations, build a sustainable partnership where no one is left out of the table. When I say no one, including the private sector, we need to put down with it.
Yes, but?
I want them to understand that data and statistics is not, you know, a small issue in the periphery, but it's at the heart of what's creating development and how you can run a decent and good society and fund it after. I mean, it's like an infrastructure. Everyone knows that roads and bridges and healthcare stations are important part of a country's infrastructure. Well, having a statistical agency, the capacity to use data is also part of it in the 21st century and should be funded and prioritized in line with that.
Njide?
Well, COVID has shown us that we're all interconnected. So it's important that data is shared and governed by a set of principles that is guided and agreed to by every nation. And I think this is really the role of the UN, which is very timely with this conference, that, you know, we ensure that we put out a guideline around which nations can, you know, have a point of reference to build their data governance structures internally and be able to share data appropriately and protecting individual rights and using the data for public good.
Thank you. Fono, last question to you, and then you can go to bed. The question is, as donor governments, the governments are asking, you know, how can we best come together to make progress, you know, on capacity building, filling these data gaps? So tell us very quickly, what do you want from governments? And please unmute yourself.
Are you asking the government or donor?
You can tell us both, but be quick about it.
I think I'll just focus on donors, because government is actually supporting data collection and all our statistical activities. It's just the role of the donor that we really want to request donors to invest more in capacity building and transfer of knowledge to statisticians, not just the NSOs, but also to our users of data, all users of data like media, policymakers, and all the users. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fono, from joining us from Samoa. Thank you very much, Njide. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for your questions. Lunch is served.
Thank you.
Thank you.